got through this. Easy for listening. I was able to do it. Easy for dancing. I'm not a great lover of cats. That's my fear. You're a disgrace, you are. Not me. That's my fear. You're a disgrace, you are.
Hello and welcome to Shadowboxing. Today my guest is Dennis Grosvenor. Dennis, welcome. You traveled from Sydney to Perth. What was the occasion?
Well, I was invited, I received a phone call many months back from resident action groups here in Perth, specifically because I'd made a documentary about state politics and the underlying web of corruption in New South Wales. And someone over here had purchased a copy of that documentary, and when they watched it, they saw parallels, and not necessarily saying corruption, but at least in process, or the corruption of process, here in Western Australia. And they felt that the story of New South Wales told in that documentary was pertinent to the situation they currently found themselves in here in Western Australia. And they said, would you come over with the film and present it and say something about it and tell us something of the history of making that film? So I agreed to do it, and I'm here. And I'm here.
Everyone remembers you as an actor back starting in
well,
the
not
70s.
everybody. A lot of those people are dead now.
Already now, sorry. Tell us something about how you started your career and what you've done and how you've been involved in television and film.
Well, acting is something that I always wanted to do, but I didn't start out my working career as an actor. I didn't go straight to NIDA. I never went to NIDA actually at all. A lot of my early working life was in physical manual labour. I actually worked on the Snowy Mountain scheme on one of the last dams they ever constructed in that scheme, the Blowering Dam, and I was a dump truck operator and helped build that dam. But night after night on night shift, I'd go up and down that dam, and as much as I enjoyed the work, I thought, well, it's time now, Dennis, to go back and try and do what you really want to do.
Have some change.
And make some change in your life. You're getting on, you know, you're 23 years of age. So I came back to Sydney, and I was particularly naive. I knew absolutely nothing about acting, and I spoke pretty badly, so I needed a voice coach, and the voice coach introduced me to Shakespeare, that I knew nothing about, and it helped me prepare audition pieces. And then I went to agents, and of course they didn't want to know me because I'd just come back from the Snowy and I was basically a truck driver.
Yes.
So I realised I had to start making stories up and telling them that I'd been in amateur theatre in Tumut, near the Snowy Mountains, which I'd never been in. But I thought, well, I better school myself on what avenues are available to get into acting and something about Australian acting. So the most prominent Australian actor that I could think of at the time was Chips Rafferty. A lot of people may not remember Chips, but Chips was a great Australian actor from the 50s and early 60s. And I phoned up his agent and said that, you know, I'd like to have an interview of Chips Rafferty. And my accent was, my diction was so bad she misunderstood what I said, and ultimately she gave me his address and organised an interview with him. And I went out one day to his flat at Rose Bay, and he arrived at the front door in his dressing gown and said, who are you? I said, well, I'm the actor who wants to talk to you about your experiences in the Australian film industry. And he said, wait a minute. He said, I thought you were a journalist who wanted to talk about my experiences in the Italian film industry. And he said, I've never worked in the Italian film industry, but he said, I wanted to meet the fool that would come out and ask me such a question.
That's good. Good start.
Yes, it was a good start. Anyway, he's a very nice man. He said, look, he said, I'm not ready yet. He said, go around the corner. He said, give me half an hour and come back. And he said, I'll have a chat to you. So I went around the corner and sat in my car, and half an hour later I came back. Chips made me a cup of tea. And he said, remember, this is in the early 60s. Yeah. And he said to me, my advice is don't do it. And he said, I'll tell you why you shouldn't do it. He said, because in this country, he said, at this moment in time, he said, if you had an Australian and you shot this on a film, and he flew through Sydney Harbour and under the harbour bridge and did loops over the top and came back down again, and you put that on film, said it was an Australian, he said, they'd laugh you out of the cinema. No one would believe it. However, if you said it was an American who flew that plane, they would believe the scene. And he said, that's the problem we face in Australia at this time. They don't believe in themselves.
That's sometimes still the case because we got so much of American programs on television still and on cinemas. So with our little Australian film and television industry, which is very successful, we're still not believing ourselves.
Well, I think we do, but I think the confidence has increased quite considerably since those days.
Agree. So, what was the peak of the career of your acting?
Well,
what do you think?
When you're an actor, you do a lot of work to survive, and a lot of the work you do, you don't particularly want to do, but you do it because you have to survive. But once in a while, things come along that stay in your memory, and you think, well, that was worthwhile, that was something worth doing. And by coincidence, the first thing that has always stuck in my mind, and I always felt was one of the most important moments in my life as an actor, actually happened here in Perth.
Yes.
And it's when I came over here in actually 1971, and I was specifically brought over here from Sydney, and at this time I'd only been playing very small roles back in Sydney and guest roles usually as a baddie in the Crawford television shows. And I was brought over here to play the lead in a controversial play written by the English writer Dennis Potter called Son of Man, and it's a very controversial look at the life of Christ. And I played Christ in that play, and we filled the theatre every night from the opening night. But there's a story that goes around about anybody who approaches this role that it is cursed, or any production about the life of Christ is cursed. And of course I laughed that off. But I think it was on the probably the third night after the opening night, the third performance,
yes,
we had a very steep raked stage that came down, and I had a scene where I had to, when they blacked out the lights on stage, I had to walk down this steep raked part of the stage. And on the third performance, third night into the season, I fell over and broke a bone in my foot. And I ended up in, I limped through the rest of the show and ended up in Perth Hospital for that evening. And they were ready to do operations to repair me. And I said, no, you can't do that. You know, we still have 3 or 4 weeks of the season to go.
Back to the stage.
And the next morning, there were TV cameras in my hospital room, and you had a tabloid newspaper at the time, and I can't quite recall what the name of that.
The Mail?
May well have been the Mail. But anyway, the next day, I was on the front page of this tabloid newspaper. There was a picture of me with my foot up in a sling in Perth Hospital, and the headline over the top was, "Christ breaks foot."
Great.
What we did was I bandaged that foot up, and for the next week I played Christ holding a staff, which was reasonable, I suppose, as he spent a lot of his ministry in the desert. And as the foot gradually, one way or another, repaired itself without the operation they suggested, I then got rid of the staff and we completed the remainder of the season. But getting back to your point, that is one of the highlights, because of the play and the potency of that play, of the career.
So that was the film, television, and the long-lasting career, because it went longer than 30 years. You stopped being an actor, and something dramatical happened in your life, and you came back from one of your travels.
You're referring to the fact that I came back and found my street being demolished. Is that what you're referring to there? Yes.
The shocking experience.
Yes. Yes, I did come back from holidays, and the street that I once knew that had magnificent, mature, old trees that had given its ambience for generations had all been, well, most of them had been chopped down, not on my property, but most of them had been chopped down.
What was the year, Dennis?
That year was 2007. And we knew that this was about to take place because we'd been through the process of trying to fight the redevelopment of this very special part of Sydney, and we had lost the fight. But of course, when developers come in and do this sort of thing, they don't give you a warning. They don't put a letter in your box and say, we'll be here tomorrow to wreck the neighbourhood. They put up a fence maybe a month, maybe 2 months before, and the houses next door start to get raided by opportunists who come in to take what's left inside that's of any value to them. But you just wake up one morning and there's a bulldozer or a chainsaw next door, and they set to work. Well, I happened to be away on holidays when it happened, and when I came back, the street that I'd left no longer existed as it was when I left. And I went out into the street the following morning, and I thought somebody should make a record of this. That was all, my intention was simply to make a record of it, not necessarily to go any further, maybe just for myself.
So you grabbed the camera and start recording.
So I went inside, grabbed the camera, went out into the street in the middle of the mayhem, and started to record the bulldozers tearing down these grand old Federation homes, and the chainsaws ripping through these wonderful old trees that had been there, some of them for a century.
So don't go away, because after the short break we're coming back with shadowboxing and much more of the story of Dennis.